May that be said of me. That's the thought that went across my mind as I was wrestling with this text this morning from Mark chapter 12, verse 14. The context of this verse is actually the beginning of a series of questions that come right in a row. Mark chapter 12 begins with the parable of the tenants, but then after this parable, where the chief priests and the teachers of the law and the elders understood the gravity of the parable, they started to look for a way to arrest him. So they ask him a series of questions. The first question is going to be about paying taxes to Caesar. The Sadducees will take their shot about the resurrection. Then you're going to have the question of the greatest commandment. The whole chapter is this series of questions looking for a way to arrest Jesus. But it's how this series of questions begins that struck me this morning and caused me to say to myself, may that be said of me. Mark chapter 12, verse 13 says, later, they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to Jesus to catch him in his words. So right off the bat of this text, we see that these are enemies of Christ. They are not his friends. These are the people in competition with Jesus. They are not one of his disciples. These are ones that are looking for Jesus, for a way to trip Jesus up. They're coming for him. But what your enemies think of you can be quite telling of who you really are. Now, before I get into exactly what it is they say of Jesus, let me make this distinction. There is a difference between stereotypes and reputations. Stereotypes are characteristics or summaries of you that are put on you by someone else. A reputation is something that very often, for better or worse, it's something that you earn. Now, what I'm not saying is if you have a bad reputation that it is solely your fault. I'm not saying that, because sometimes there is a blurring between a stereotype and a reputation or misinformation that comes in to inform either one of them. But there's a part of it where I've even wrestled with swimming in circles and going into settings where evangelicals are not really welcomed. I was actually at one of these a couple of weeks ago, where the very word evangelical was kind of spoken with a hiss. And I was talking to one of the other evangelical Christians that were there, and I said, you know, what breaks my heart is, I wish they knew that we weren't all like the stereotype. But then I said this, but it's not a reputation as if we haven't earned it. Because the venom with which the more loud and the more public evangelicals spew is difficult for those of us that don't share the same sentiments. A reputation and a stereotype are related, but they are different. For oftentimes a stereotype is forced onto you by a summary of an entire group. But a reputation is something that you actually have a chance to earn. And the good news about that is, if you don't have a good reputation, you have a say in it. You get to give them the evidence by which they can come to a new conclusion, but if they come to the same one, then you're able to love them nonetheless. With this in place, let me read the verse that caused me to say to myself, may that be said of me. Verse 14, the enemies came to Jesus and said, Teacher, which in Mark's gospel is always an indication of somebody that's not exactly on Jesus' side. Teacher, we know that you are a man of integrity. The enemies come to Jesus and say, we know you are a man of integrity. It's your reputation. We know that your integrity, we've looked for ways to trip you up. We've looked for scandals behind the closed doors. We've looked for people that have been mistreated by you, abused by you, neglected by you. But the problem is we can find nothing. We know you're a man of integrity. May that be said of me. Too many ministers, too many Christians are trying to hide as a means of being known as integrity. They're trying to hide their sins, trying to hide their abuse. They're trying to hide their anger, instead of allowing it to be transformed so that what people perceive them to be actually matches who it is behind closed doors. We know that you're a man of integrity, and then they go on to define it further. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are. What that doesn't mean is that Jesus is not compassionate. For Jesus' compassion in the Gospels is on full display. But what it means is this: regardless of who it is that the person is standing in front of you, your choice always will be what is good, what is holy, what is true. And it is not swayed whether you have the king or a president or some sort of influential figure in front of you. You are the same, regardless if you're behind closed doors or out in public, regardless if you're in front of a peasant or if you're in front of the president. You are the same. You are not swayed by their position, because your center of identity, your center of moral knowingness, comes from something that is internal, that is not controlled by that which is external. We know that you are a man of integrity. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are, but you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. May this be said of me. But too often, when it comes to what we are known for, instead of doing the hard inner work of transforming into that reputation, we try to seize it. We try to play act it. We try to control it. How is something like this said of you? By becoming it. One of the church fathers said that when his enemies hurl accusations at him, this is a desert monk, when his enemies throw her accusations at them, his response is, oh no, it's far worse than that. Because he's dove deep into the darkness of his heart. And then he says, and the same thing happens whenever compliments are thrown my way. Oh no, it's actually far greater than that. Because you might compliment my ability to speak, or you might compliment the time in which I spend in prayer. But nothing can outshine the truth that I am a child of God. It is knowing who you are that frees you to have an integrity that is not swayed by those in front of you, and ultimately your very life sings the truth that doesn't just set you free, but sets everyone free around you. May this be said of me. May this be said of us. I love you guys. Have a great week.